Awesome. So you should have all heard that lady. We are officially recording. Welcome to tonight's Create-a-thon Creator Workshop event. My name is Kelly. I'm the Executive Director of Knitting for Peace. Tonight we have the world famous, I can say that because she's from New Zealand, the world famous Natasha Hanson, who's going to be walking us through how to do embroidery on knits and also telling us how to do her brand new Fingerprint finger puppet design. So we're very excited, but I want to take this opportunity to introduce my wonderful colleague, Jo. Give a wave, Jo, who many of you know. She is our shipment and delivery coordinator, but that is certainly not everything she does. And we have our board chair here this evening. Kim, give a wave. And if you're another board member, give a wave. Lots of Knitting for Peace supporters here tonight. So for those of you who don't know, which I don't know any of you who don't know, but the Create-a-thon is our biggest fundraiser of the year, and it's also a time that we like to build community. So it's been going since the 4th of August, and it ends on Monday the 18th. So I want to invite all of you to the final event of the Create-a-thon, which is on Monday the 18th, which Kim will be hosting. And it's our first ever Knitting for Peace Community Craft Circle. So it's going to be at this time, 4 p.m., and it's going to be on a Monday this time, but from then on out, it's the second Tuesday of every single month. And this is a craft circle, but it's also community. So you can bring something that you're making for Knitting for Peace. You can bring something that you're making for somebody else. You can bring nothing, right? This is just a time for us to build community, to chat, to fight the loneliness epidemic, to fight for the mission that we really think is important. So I want to encourage all of you to sign up for that, which you can do on our website. Just go to events and you'll get the Zoom link. Hint, it's this Zoom link. So if you're interested, you can attend. But the Create-a-thon is our biggest fundraiser, like I said, and just so you're aware, we are very under where we should be, where our goal is $7,500 for this event. Darlene and I just ran the numbers and we're at about 3,200 right now. So if you have it in your hearts and have the ability, because we are very aware of the fact that it's not the easiest time, right? We're people, we understand that. But if you do have the ability, we would really appreciate the assistance. This helps pay for what we do, right? So I'm going to put a link into the chat. Visit it as you wish. And then let's get into the fun stuff. So the reason that you guys are all here is because of Natasha, and she is a Kiwi stay-at-home mom, and you can listen to her talk all day long. It's beautiful. She lives in Minnesota, and she is going to talk about growing up in New Zealand and how that inspired her to create We Folk Valley designs. And then she's going to walk us through the embroidery on knits and also crochet. So if you can embroider on knit, you can also embroider on crochet. You're not left out. And she's going to walk us through her adorable fingerprint puppets. So I'm going to shut my trap and hand it over to Natasha to start sharing.
Okay, I will share my screen.
And just as a note, if you have any questions, please throw them in the chat and I will gently interrupt Natasha. And if you aren't speaking, if you could mute yourself just so there's no background noise for her presentation. All right. Thank you so much.
Okay, does everyone see my slideshow?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So I'll just get started. Kia ora. Hi, my name is Natasha and I'm a Kiwi currently living in Minnesota. So as Kelly said, I design knitted wee folk, and I love to take photos of them in my backyard. Taking photos, I think, is probably just as much fun to me as knitting them. I'll just, here we go. Right, today what I'll cover, Kelly said this too, is growing up in New Zealand and how it inspired me. I grew up in a valley, so that's the name there too, for Wee Folk Valley. And then I'll talk about my fingerprint puppet that I made for Knitting for Peace and why I love embroidering on knits. You can see here I'm at my parents' farm. It was about 10 years ago, and they've got just a small flock of sheep there. So there's growing up in New Zealand and the inspiration behind Wee Folk Valley. So there's another picture of the valley I grew up in. And on the right is my New Zealand fern folk. They've got the wee spiral fern hats. And then this year I took I thought they needed somewhere to live. So I made some wee hobbit holes for them to live in. I had a very shy-like childhood. Like it was very, very beautiful where I grew up. I grew up in Timaru, which is a small seaside village in New Zealand. It's for people who know New Zealand, it's about 2 hours south of Christchurch, which is one of the main cities in the South Island. It if you fly overhead, you know, it's those quilt patchwork farms, and then the Southern Alps, which you see on the Lord of the Rings, to the west. My parents were teachers, they're retired now, and they had an organic hobby farm. So they were very, very hard workers. So they just did this all just for fun in their spare time. And my mum, she insisted that they got sheep because she's really into spinning and dyeing and knitting. She's a bit into everything. And as you can see here on the left, there is so there's the sheep up the top, and then she would actually have parties where she had her like dyeing parties, and they'd all bring fleece and they'd be dyeing up different like vats of fleece. And you can see my brother Johnny there on the right, and he's we'd always have pet lambs too. And you can see his sweater is the same as the fleece there. So it was in the photo album around the same point. So I'm guessing it was from the same batch of fleece there. That's me. Don't I look adorable? That's that's me at 2 years and 2 years and 4 months, if you'd believe it. So there I am carding wool. So I guess I'm copying my mum. That was that's on her knitting chair, and you can see I'm wearing a wee sweater. And my mother taught me to knit. So just like a lot of people do, you know, on the knee, I remember. And then I'm sure her mother taught her, and her mother taught her. And I remember I never knit anything too fancy when I was younger. I'd always be knitting scarves, it seemed, but I always really, really loved knitting. And I remember I would go off and knit a bit, and then I would drop a stitch, and then I'd bring it to her, and she would pick up the stitches, it seemed, from way, way down, and I always thought that was very, very impressive. Heat is very expensive in New Zealand, so wool is vital. Clothes are very expensive too because everything gets shipped, so we were always like, we were wanting wool, and the homes aren't very well insulated because, like, say in America where it gets properly cold, you need insulated houses. We don't need them, but then it is also very cold. It's actually almost colder inside sometimes, it feels like, than outside. So wool is cool. Now I have a funny story about kind of growing up, and if you'd believe it, you know how you think like what would be the cool things for kids to wear, and we called them natural wool jerseys, which is natural wool sweaters growing up. And the cool kids would wear just grey sweaters that their mums would make because everyone's mums knit. We had a little farming school, like a farming community with like about 70 kids in it. And but my mum my mum, I guess she didn't want me to be cool because she just refused to knit stockinette. She said she couldn't do a whole jersey in it. So, but I had these amazing like Icelandic yoke sweaters and these bright mohair, I remember in the 80s, these fleecy, amazing sweaters. And I think back now and I think if only the kids had let their mums kind of decide, you know, what to knit, we could have had all these amazing sweaters. So here's my brother again. And here's the token shot of, you know, like the kid at the bookshelf taking all the books out, kind of like the toilet paper roll, you know, how you take that picture of them winding all the toilet paper down. And we have bookshelves everywhere because my parents really, you know, valued books. And we even had them in the hallways, and we'd often have more than one. So, and now I have bookshelves everywhere in my house. We had weekly library visits too, where I remember being very just weighed down with books. And I just loved fantasy books like fairies or anywhere where the main character would kind of go into this fantastical world. That was, you know, kind of my jam. And I was the kid who was the bookworm. So I would be on the school bus and I would be reading all the way home on the school bus. And then I would be walking home and, you know, reading as I walked. I was that kid. And I remember very vividly reading The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe by C.S. Lewis and just thinking, wow, like the kid's going through a cupboard and going into this whole other, well, into Narnia, like a whole nother world. And it really made me think of like the ordinary world into the fantasy world. Seems like it really opened up my imagination because it seems so easy now to imagine I could just be walking around and there could be, you know, another world so close. So that was a big pivotal point for me. I have a love of illustrations too. I mean, who doesn't love Beatrix Potter and Cicely Mary Barker with her flower fairies? I mean, just so beautiful for me. So I would imagine, because I had such a beautiful place to grow up, I often took my imagination outside in nature and I would read these books and then I would walk around the valley. And then I would like, I could kind of almost see out of the corner of my eye, I could kind of imagine like, you know, rabbits scurrying across or the wind in the willows. I would imagine Toad, and because I had a creek too that I would rowboat down and all these flowers, I would imagine fairies around. So I was in just this imagination kind of heaven there. And my dream job I thought would be to draw these beautiful illustrations. I thought, you know, make the stories as well, but I'm not an artist, and I don't think I ever kind of realized I could be. But I think enjoying art, you know, was enough for me. I thought I can just sit and just look, and it seems like enough, but that still would be my ideal job. So here's my dad. And the name of my valley that we grew up in is a Deer Valley. And it's a nice place to imagine. So my parents also imagined, I realized, they started with just a farm and it was hay all around them. And then my parents, you know, kind of realized they don't want to farm it. It's a lot of work for just some hay. So they just had ideas of what they wanted. Like my mum wanted her flock of sheep, and my dad, he's a real dreamer. He if you see in the middle of this kind of lake, there is just a little, like there's some flax bushes, which is a native plant in New Zealand, and it's a wee island. So he always wanted an island, so he got his wee island, which I thought was great. And that used to be a field, so he got a digger in and he dug it all out, and then he planted all these trees by hands, and he must have you know, easily 1,000 trees he's planted. They've got 23 acres. So the valley was their canvas, but they were always working very, very hard. It's not easy to plant a tree, you know, and you have to dig it hard and make sure it goes in, and then there's all the pruning and everything. But we'd have orchards and just, so it was this real kind of fertile place of imagining. And like now I always have this, my kids always know that I'm always going on about how everything starts with an idea. Like I might be passing a sculpture that I think is really beautiful, and I just tell the kids, I say, that just started with an idea, but everything did, like big buildings and everything. So I'm a big fan of ideas, and then you imagine stuff into being, which I think is really cool. The other thing too is just practically, there was 2 channels on TV when I was growing up, and it during the day there probably wasn't kid shows on, so we just went outside in nature and filled the time that way. Now I'm not sure how old I was here, maybe about between probably 10 and 12. And I had my best friend, she was Baha'i, and she invited me to a wee kind of luncheon, and um, it was focused on peace. And I thought that was really that would be good to share with the group. And I dressed up as an Indian. I've got my sari on there, and I'd done a picture of different nationalities. And I thought, you know, as a kid, I was really interested in peace. And looking back, I'm not sure if everybody feels kind of as sensitive as I did about peace, but I'm not sure. Like when I watched the news, we'd all watch the news at 6 o'clock, and so I had this beautiful, peaceful valley and lovely community. And then I remember very stark images of, you probably all remember it too, but the Ethiopian famine, and just these shocking images of like starving children, and just being amazed that nobody was helping. And it was just, it was a kind of time in my life where I was like, oh, okay. And then I started learning about history in secondary school, and um, the Holocaust, and I just couldn't believe it, you know. So it was this big kind of moment of like figuring out, like, okay, how do I integrate this kind of all these feelings that it brought, and also feeling kind of like I couldn't do anything. I remember very vividly like going to an apple tree, because I always kind of turned to nature. I remember going to an apple tree and just sitting there and crying and thinking, you know, just getting so sad. So, and my big question I think I was kind of grappling with was kind of like, what can I do? So I did do some charity things, and that kind of helped a bit. Like there was a thing called the 48-hour famine, and people would pay you to not eat for 2 days, and that would go to people that needed it. And I made some sweets for selling for like cancer research and raising money for that. And all that like helped. But I was also grappling with, you know, how to keep hope, and kind of, you know, kind of how can I kind of, yeah, keep hope in amongst all of this. So that's when I went kind of, I don't know, it sounds kind of weird, but I went hardcore into my nature. You know, that was I mean, I know a lot of people turn to nature. Um, it gives them great support, but my walks with my imagination seemed even more important. Um, and I was thinking about kind of what was it, and I think, you know, my walks with nature, with my imagination, it was, they were always kind of based on stories too. And I think well, one, I feel like those kind of, in some of the stories, it's just fairies, and I can't ever imagine there being wars or anything like that. But in other stories, there are wars and things, and it's the underdog often that can kind of, good does trump evil. And I think that's really what, I needed at the time, you know. So then I skipped forward a bit, and well, it probably skips forward a lot, but I moved to Minnesota after marrying an American. And kind of all the while I was always knitting. But I really got into knitting when my son was born. As a lot of people do, I think they kind of start at their they learn, and then it's so much fun to knit for kids. And um he went to a Waldorf preschool, and that was really great for me because people talk about when you immigrate somewhere, what do you miss and things. But the Waldorf school gave me this, like, it was a lovely community, and it was very nature based. So just like I had this lovely little country school, they always spent time outside, and it was very like simple toys. Like they had these wooden pig dolls that the wooden pig dolls, they have no faces, so then when the kids are playing with them, they're not forced to play like happy or sad, and they can, it just lets the imagination, like the imagination's kind of at the forefront, and then they can have a good old time, imagining what they want to. But also the big thing with pig dolls is they blew my mind. Like, a lot of people might see pig dolls and just think, okay. But I seem to have this like unhealthy obsession with like pig dolls. I was just like, what are these? Because if you think I was a fairy loving child, and they're just beautifully handcrafted too, I just fell in love with them. And they were seasonal too, which I love. And they had them on nature tables, so they might tell they might have a fall harvest scene, and would have silks down in these little pig dolls, and they might be, making some gathering their harvest or whatever, and it was just so beautiful. So at the time too, there was kind of, just, there's always news been going on, and news is often bad. And at the time, there was lots of gun violence, and it was just it felt like this really hard time. So also, I felt like it was very, living in America, I kind of had to come to terms with, I mean, overall it feels not as safe as New Zealand. So it was kind of coming to terms with like, how am I gonna deal with all this kind of anxiety of raising children here? And I know no place is perfect, but I think I really needed these little kind of my little escape again. So I thought, I'm going to make these pig dolls, and I'm going to put them all over my house, and it's going to, like, be beautiful and make me feel, great. But the problem was, and I haven't talked about yet, but they're very fiddly to make. So, and I cannot stand fiddly stuff. Like, I love many things, but I just don't have the patience. So as you can see here, so they fit the pig doll with little felted clothes, but it's very like, you sew little things. And so I thought, what am I going to do? Oh, I love these, but so I thought, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a knit pig doll, which I think kind of felt like a bit naive at the start, because now I think of how hard it was to make a knit pig doll. But I feel like I was on a mission too, with all the bad news. Like, I wanted to be surrounded by these beautiful knitted, because I love knitting at that stage. I was really into it, beautiful knitted dolls. So what I did, you can see on the left, is kind of my first attempt. And then here, many years later, here's my Wee Folk Valley, kind of my the later versions. So I would very kind of, it was this kind of experimenting of, I would try and figure out, like, how am I going to do their heads, and how am I going to do their arms, and how am I going to do their hair? And it would slowly, very slowly, I would figure out, I would have these wee eureka moments, and I would like even the peg doll in the middle, I realized I don't want to figure out how to knit, or how to, because I always thought I'd make knitting patterns. I didn't want to figure out how to get the gauge so everyone could have to fit these. So I thought I'll just do a bead and a pipe cleaner. So it's a bead for a head, 12mm wooden bead, and a pipe cleaner to kind of keep them upright. And then, yeah, so my main thing was I didn't want them to be non-fiddly, but they're so small, you know, that wasn't just an easy kind of thing. And then I also wanted them to stand by themselves. So they're unworsted, so they're a very firm fabric, because I wanted to use them to decorate my house. And as I said before, my motivation was joy. And what I mean by that is just with all the bad news going on, you know, and it was a time, you know, when I started really working on these, it was 2020. So it was COVID, and it was George Floyd, and it was just terrible things were going on. So, um, you know, I had a great kind of, I almost thought it as this like mission, this holy mission to kind of put these beautiful things out into the world. Because that's the thing too. It's like, for me, it was beauty. And to me, it's like, you know, war is so ugly, and like being mean is so ugly. And I just thought, if I put beautiful things out into the world, that can't be a bad thing. So then finally, when I figured it all out, then I had to think about how I was going to, because I wanted to kind of share my my dolls. I thought I'll give Ravelry a go, which is a great little knitting and crocheting community online, and you can find patterns there and other makers to connect with. And I had never done any kind of pattern writing before at all. So what I did is I kind of took 10 patterns that kind of were like dolls or teddy bears, or just things that were kind of like mine, and I saw how they formatted things, and I just thought, okay, I will kind of copy what they do. And they all seem to kind of have the same things, like you say, what kind of yarn you use, and gauge, and needles. And so I just, you know, studied that. And then I realized I wanted some testers. So I looked through people's project patterns that I really, pages that I really admired, because you can put up your projects online too. And then I said, would you please help me? And luckily people were nice, because I wasn't, you know, a designer yet. And I sent some photos out and tried to entice them. And then I started a group, and that's another thing I'd never done before. Because I wanted a wee community, I just wanted to kind of hang out with people who liked wee folk too. And that's my first design there. On the left, it's daffodil life cycle. So you can see they're going through the phases of the daffodil there. So the funny thing is, kind of when I was thinking about how kind of my story, and I was thinking, you know, when I was younger, I really wanted to draw. And then I just started, like, the minute I kind of finished designing these wee folk, I took them outside and I started putting them in scenes. And I wanted so much more than just like a doll on a white background with a knitting pattern. I kind of wanted something for me to imagine with. So then if I saw bad news, I could then imagine my daffodil folk on the hill and kind of go to my happy place. And like, it was just a real extension of the books in my childhood. And here I've got a picture of Cecily Mary Barker's little acorn boy fairy. And then I think last autumn I went and took some pictures on the hill. And it's funny because I've got a little half-acre property in Minnesota. So I take a lot of pictures on my hill, and I think it kind of mirrors, you could have a valley with a hill. So stories, I've told you a lot about how the stories were important, but in Waldorf education, they have some lovely stories too. They have The Children of the Forest by Elsa Beskow, and she's kind of a Swedish Beatrix Potter, just gorgeous books, and a lot of them have little wee folk in them. And here's her Children of the Forest, which I love, and the little man's got a pine cone hat, which I think is great. And here's a story of the Root Children, which I think is more famous in Europe, but I wish it was known, everywhere, because it's such a beautiful story. And they have these these little root children, and they wear little brown clothes, and they snuggle underground and hibernate in the winter, and then they bring out the flowers in the spring, which I just think is just such a beautiful image. And that's by Sybil von Olfers, and she was a German lady. And then so a lot of my photos are pretty time consuming to take, I think. This one took me a long time, but it's a passion project, and I'm always happy to get kind of my favorite shots. So the next thing kind of for my wee folk is, as you can see here, they're carrying knitted flowers. So I realized if I want to do the scenes and I want to kind of well, I liked, fiber art too, so I had to make things for them. So that kind of inspired, I wouldn't stop, but I added to my world with little trinkets, like I made baskets and things. And here they needed some houses. So I have a porcini mushroom and toadstool mushroom houses, and there's my hobbit holes, which I made with some moss in the spring there. And I mean, again, that's inspired by New Zealand. And then I think I've had tea party scenes for all of my wee folk. My husband always jokes that I always end up with some kind of tea party. So I'm always try to incorporate nature when I can. So there's a wee acorn teapot, and there's a wee daffodil teacups too. So kind of I have my old and my new inspirations. So my old inspirations I've got here is my fern folk in New Zealand. And then my new inspirations, you can tell by the snow if you know Minnesota. It's just things that I happen to see and love, And my husband's Norwegian, so I went to a cousin's house. Well, we have a cousin who lives close, and she has beautiful Norwegian things all around the house. And so she 100% inspired these Scandinavian, they're called my Scandinavian Christmas dolls. And there's not a big Scandinavian community in New Zealand. So I don't think I would have had these dolls without her input. And I actually went to Norway this year, and I went out and took some pictures of my dolls out in the mossy forests. I was going to put that picture, but then my son said it looked so much like the New Zealand one. I wanted to show a good snowy Minnesota scene. So that's kind of my childhood. And talking about new inspirations, again, like the Fingerprint Puppets came up. So I had design goals for my Fingerprint Puppets. There was just practical needs for the finger puppets. They'd be used by adults for language development for children, So they needed to fit comfortably over a finger. So I did lots of experimenting with yarns and needle sizes and things like that. And then they're also just no chokables on them, so that if they're being used around babies, that's obvious reasons there. And then again, like everything I do, they're so small. I mean, you can obviously see the finger size. A big thing for me is nobody's going to want to knit them if they're fiddly. That's kind of a huge thing for me as well. And a huge motivator is just myself. It's like I often want to make a lot of my own things. So um, I had to think, and I want them to also be easily repeatable. So I never thought about sewing arms on, but so then I had to kind of think like, how am I going to do that? So there's a very long bobble arms and bobble boots. So they're all, I'll talk about kind of the construction, I think, soon. And I also wanted them to be diversity friendly. When well, one, to fit in with the mission of Knitting for Peace. And just because I think it's really, really important with, in 2020, being here for George Floyd, just really, I think, woke everybody up to the vital importance of diversity. So that's why for my Wee Folk Valley dolls, I always have encourage people to have dark brown beads and the lighter brown. So, there's that representation. But when I was looking up kind of how to do that or thinking about that, I was looking up hijabs and kind of what was important there. And I came across some things on YouTube with Muslim women talking about their childhood in America. And they talked about just the lack of representation in kind of in anything in the classroom. Like they didn't see themselves anywhere. And I was also at the time, I was reading an article about this teacher in America, and she'd put up a all is welcome sign in her classroom, and that was considered this really crazy, I don't know, like it was told to be taken down. And it just made me think, wow, what a really crazy time we live in, where that's seen as a bad thing to say all are welcome, and it's a very direct message that, people aren't welcome, basically. So, as well as the practical needs that they were used for adults, I also wanted to make child size, because I think my goal for them too was that I'd love to see them in classrooms, and with the fingerprint head, then the correct skin color, exactly. And then I tried to do African American hairstyles and just like different ideas so that more people were represented. And yeah, the idea too with the fingerprint was that it seems a strange thing, but I think if you say every child is unique, it's almost like people don't even really, well, maybe they do, maybe I'm not thinking about it correctly, but they don't really kind of get that that's a big deal. But people seem to really kind of, as a symbol, a fingerprint, everybody knows everybody has a different fingerprint. So I think that to me was a really powerful symbol too, to really underline that like every child is unique and that needs to be seen. So I was watching the Craftism video on the Knitting for Peace YouTube channel, and I was thinking, this is my little Craftism attempt. I would love to have people knit these and give them to their local schools, and then this is their way of kind of saying everybody is welcome, but not being very obvious. They're kind of creeping in, you know, like craftism does. I mean, I know it's sometimes more obvious, but I thought that was a nice idea. So the construction. So because I'm like pretty obsessed with things being non-fiddly, they're knit in the round, so from the bottom up on DPNs. When you're dealing with like as little stitches as I want, you have to really deal with DPNs. And I know it's a bit of a learning curve for a lot of people, but I think once you get the hang of them, it's I find it much easier. So they've got bobble boots and arms, and the hair is looped around the head hole, and then the decoration is added with embroidery. So here's some attaching of the hair. So the girl's hair is attached by looping it around the head hole. So you enter the needle up kind of by the shoulder through the head hole, and then you leave some hanging down. And then you do the same stitch on the second, but obviously it's already hanging down. So you just keep it and you go around and around, and then you end up just leaving some hanging down the other end. And then you can make braids if you want by just putting a little bit of yarn here and here, and you can go really crazy with the braids if you want. And I like to knot the ends because I figure like a little bit of yarn might come undone. So that's practical kind of.
Natasha, while you take a drink, I'm going to share with you some of the adoration in the chat. So
Okay.
people are saying that first of all, you had a beautiful childhood. They're
Okay.
loving your scenes and the idea of setting of nature for homing your little wee folk. People love that they are not fiddly and that they're going to be easy. Karen is like, I'm doing it this weekend. Karen's on it. She's excited to start immediately. And people are really, really appreciating the thought that you put into the fingerprint, saying that the finger will reflect the user's skin tone and color, and all the thought that you put into this design for us and for the people who will benefit from it. So I just wanted to let you know that everyone is really grateful for all the thought that you put into making these so diverse and inclusive and welcoming, honestly, because sorry, but here everyone is welcome, and you can't have my sign.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you very much. And thank you, ladies. I appreciate that. Yeah, and that's how I feel too. Like, I think that's why when I heard the craftism, it's like women have been like rocking it and protesting, and and they've been doing that so beautifully under really trying conditions. Um, yeah, I'm grateful to be given this opportunity. I feel like we're a good match. So here's the simple clothes decoration. It doesn't get much more simple than a stitch. I'm very like, I don't know, like, I don't think you can call me lazy because you see all my work, but I'm very focused into doing the least amount of work I can. And then instead of weaving it in on the bottom, you just snip it so that you don't see the black through very much. And then I realized I was going to talk about my duplicate, how to decorate the dolls, but they're so tiny that I'm going to talk more about piece pal decoration. So the most you can do is 3 duplicate stitches, or that I could figure out on the dresses. So, right, so we're on embroidery or knits. And as Kelly said, hopefully for those crocheters, like I would have loved to have more for you, and I'm sorry, but I just learnt to knit. So hopefully one more day, but in the future. But I hope this can inspire you to put some embroidery on your crochet too. So the benefits of embroidery, you can add a few stitches and you can make it really unique. A big reason why I do embroidery is because I have really small designs, and they're so small. Like I remember not on this toadstool house, but I have a mini toadstool house that has a door that's 1 stitch high. So I wouldn't want to do color work on that, you know. But you can also, you know, make it so unique in your own, which I love. Many stitches can be redone, so if you're not happy, you can pull them back, which is really, really great. Like I'm not an embroidery expert. I just started like everybody else started, and I feel like I don't have the predisposition to be this wonderful because of the fiddly stuff, but it shouldn't work, I guess. It shouldn't work, but I love embroidery, and that's because it has so many benefits. Like you can pull it back, so you can practice and practice and practice, and you've got that knitted garment, the knitted toy, and you can just do it till it looks nice. And I used to hate finishing. I thought, um, oh, this is my worst part. But now I realize that is when you can really elevate your project. And that is what you actually want to spend probably the most time doing. This is where you put a little bit more time in and you can just make such a beautiful project. You know, I actually really enjoy my finishing now. And the bigger darning needles make it easy. Like I don't have the patience for small embroidery. I wish I did because it's beautiful. But you have these giant needles, you know, and your beautiful knitted fabric, which is probably bigger too. And so here's my tips for embroidery. You've got YouTube videos, which are just, I mean, I kind of think, you know, people might say, I wish I had this granny in the corner of my room just sitting there waiting to help me. But it's like YouTube videos to me are just as good, if not better, because you can rewind them. There's people who do such a beautiful job. They have overhead cameras. They even have slow mo ones like Very Pink Knits. I know she does a lot of great knitting tutorials. And yeah, so you've got YouTube videos. So you could type in how do I do a duplicate stitch, and then you will get a very, very clear video. And you could, if you don't want to practice on your knitting, you could just knit a little swatch. So you could knit a little square and just practice. And another tip is start simple to build confidence. Like a duplicate stitch is just you're duplicating a stitch, so you're just making a V. A stitch is a V, and then you just it's kind of like you come in through the bottom of the V, like the point, and then you go through the bottom of the stitch above, and then you come down to the bottom again, and then you have this beautiful duplicate stitch. So you don't have to kind of start too crazy. You can get some confidence up, and then just don't give up. Like I think if you can knit or crochet, I think you can probably embroider. My favorite stitches, here I've got my Scandinavian dolls again, is duplicate stitch. You can see in the hat. So I tried to do color work on the hats, and because it was so small, sometimes they got lost. What I love about duplicate stitch is it seems to be neater on the top of your work. And then lazy daisies on the skirt with a little French knot in the middle. And then the woven wagon wheel makes a beautiful little rose. And the wee girls on the bottom, they are actually embroidering they've got wee embroidery needles, embroidering rose bushes. Some more favorite stitches. I've got satin stitches. I've got little with the beehive hats for the door, and it's just looping around and around and around kind of next door to each other. Then the French knots for the toadstool, which I love. They give a little pop. And the long and short stitch for my fairy wings. So all those piece pals, you guys can decorate them. I showed how you kind of start a woven wagon wheel. And you have to make a 5 pointed star because it needs to be an uneven number. And then you just go over the top of one stitch and then under one, and you just go around in a circle when you do that, and then the next time it will be over the top of the stitch instead of under. And that's all it is, and it looks so fancy. But once you, and that's again from a YouTube video, it's kind of like disclaimer, if I can do it, anyone can. And I just think it looks so fancy. And they'll give you all these tips on YouTube, like get a decent amount of yarn to start with, so you're not having to kind of re-put another one on your needle halfway through. And then I've got a wee lazy daisy stitch around, and a wee chain stitch for
I'm
the
just
stem.
thinking about how cool this PAL would be to send to Ukraine.
Yeah, someone said that in my
Yeah.
Ravelry group too.
Yeah, that'd
Yeah.
be so cool.
Yeah, wouldn't that be cool? And I've actually got little sunflower dolls, with little yeah, I think about the Ukraine a lot, which I'm guessing everyone does. So I've come to the end. So this is my invitation. So on Ravelry right now is August Charity Along, and I have a little itty bitty along group. And there's a yarn prize, and you can, for the yarn prize, you have to make one piece pal or you do 3 finger puppets. So we've been having loads of fun. Goes all August, and you get to hang out with, well, basically you get to look at cute things. That's kind of why this is, I talk a lot about everything, but it's just all to me about seeing cute stuff.
So where do they go to join? Is that on Ravelry?
Yeah, it's on Ravelry, sorry. It's called an Itty Bitty Along group. So if you type in the Itty Bitty Along group, or if you type in Wee Folk Valley into Ravelry, I have a wee link on that site to my 2 groups, because I have a Wee Folk Valley group and my Itty Bitty Along group. So, or you can just message me on Ravelry. That's kind of a good place. And I'm
And
very friendly.
and Ravelry is free to join. So you do have to sign up and
Yeah.
stuff like that, but it's free to be a part of that. And Kathy has kindly um thrown the group link in there, but
Mm-hmm.
keep in mind that it will ask you to sign up. But don't let that be a deterrent.
And like when when I first heard about Ravelry, I remember someone told me about Ravelry and they said, "Oh, this is a great place." And I just thought, "Oh, okay." Like I was kind of weary. And then I thought it's going to be really complicated to join, but they make everything very, very simple. You just need to put in a handle and a password, and they have everything so easy. And I was kind of over social media at that stage, and I just thought, oh, I just can't deal with, well, basically just social media in general. But Ravelry does a really good job of, I don't know, is it called censoring, or they just keep a really good eye on everything. So it's a very safe place. I feel like, it was scary for me to put out my patterns and things to begin with. It's been just such a great supportive community, just so friendly. So I really just highly recommend it.
I do have a question though.
Mhm.
Are you, and Kathy, correct me, is this on the puppets or the pals? I'm assuming it's the pals, but are you weaving in the ends or just knotting them in the back is the question.
Is that for the puppets?
I'm not sure. It came during the pal segment, but you
Okay.
might, oh, she's gonna tell me right now. Oh, no, she's not.
Oh, that was me.
Yeah.
Natasha, loving the presentation. This is so
Thank
much
you.
fun. I was wondering, with your embroidery, how do you fasten it in the back? I assume you're fastening it before you put the stuffing in the pail, but do you tie it or do you weave it in? I've had trouble as an embroiderer with like French knots, pulling out and so forth, and I feel
Hmm.
like I could use some tips.
Yep. So it's really kind of up to you. And sometimes I feel like at the very beginning of my embroidery, say if I did at the beginning of my embroidery, if I feel like I need I use a little extra stitch sometimes to start my embroidery, just to kind of fasten it. But sometimes I feel like I just leave a bit of a longer end at on my first stitch hanging at the back, and then I just plan to knot that end to my last end. So if you look at the boy on the screen, I would just do a duplicate stitch down the bottom, my first stitch, have a end hanging down, and then for my last stitch I would knot at the back those two ends together. And then because it's a PAL, you don't need to weave it in. You can just, as long as it's not getting in your way, because it's just going to have stuffing in there anyway. But for my finger puppets, I think probably the biggest part of my finger puppets is weaving in ends. And I would just say, like, they have a hole for a head side. Tried not to weave the ends in, so you would see kind of like a messy end being woven in where that hole is. And I would also not weave a different color into a different color. So I would make sure if my hat was yellow that I'd weave the end into the hat. So it was that care. Like, I do take care, and I feel like when I'm doing my finishing, especially for something like knitting for peace, that's when I start to think of who's it going to, and then it takes it away from being a chore to, like, you're doing a loving thing, you're putting in the effort, and then it becomes a joyful thing, and it's not work then, and it's just like, this is my way to elevate it and give it the love and care it deserves, and I don't want to, it's not my name on it, but it kind of is. Like, I do that with my gifts too. Like, it's almost like giving them a little kiss, like you're putting the extra energy in.
Darlene wants to know, what is the pattern around the hat? How do you do this? Now, I don't know if she's talking about a specific hat or any hat.
It's probably this Let the Embroid hat. So for the piece pals, I used the In the Round piece pal version on your website, and I just started at the after the hair. When you change to actually I started after the face where it says hair. I just or for the girl I added some hair first, but then for the hat I just kept knitting up, and it was in the round. So I knit a Latvian braid, and then I did SSKs and knit two togethers, and then I knit a row, and then till I had like 12 stitches left. So it's all kind of knit in one thing, but I have the pattern on Ravelry on my project page. So if you go to Ravelry, or I can send it to whoever wants it to,
If you send it to me, I can send it out to everyone who attended tonight.
That would be cool. Yeah, I'll make a note.
Because I'm going to send out a follow-up email with that they're invited to join the August charity along, and just join the Itty Bitty Along group and the We Folk Valley group in general. So that would be a good addition.
Cool.
And I will also send the link to her Ravelry page, which is in the chat if you're that desperate, Darlene, my dear.
There's lots of cute photos. Like, I do cute photos, I think.
Can you remind us, so remind us of your Ravelry handle?
My handle's just, I think I think it might be like Tasha Hanson, but if you'll be able to find me on We Folk Valley. I think even if you like Googled We Folk Valley, I'm guessing you could say by Natasha Hanson. You would be able to find me.
And it'll all go out in the email.
Yeah.
So she'll get me that pattern, and tomorrow, Monday, that's fine. And I'll send out a follow-up email with all this info. But I do want to also say that there's a lot of love in the comments for those two groups. People are saying that they are really fun, that it is a safe space. So hopefully hopefully some of you are encouraged to attend and join those groups, because I think it's kind of what we're trying to do with the craft circle, you know, just a bunch of like-minded folks who just want to do good in the world. And I think that that would be a really good place for you all to meet up too.
And the itty bitty along group is crochet as well. So I know crocheters often get forgotten, but we try to give the love to the crocheters too. But another thing with the itty bitty group is I feel like if I ever have any knitting questions or crocheting questions, it's oh my goodness, just such a wealth of knowledge there. Like I could say, oh, I just can't believe the kind of response I get, you know. I've learned a lot, you know, which is great.
And the response is probably always kindness.
Yeah,
Yeah, which is
that's
lovely.
important. Yes.
Well, thank you for hosting that charity along. Thank you for creating this pattern. I can just tell everyone and loved it so much. So thank you so much for your time and your effort on this.
And thank you to everyone for showing up, you know, and I just want to give a shout out too to my son. This would be not so nice if it was. I've never done a slideshow before, and he's in his school holidays, and he was so sweet to help me, and he got my font. He told me, he basically like, oh, Mum, you know, you've got to get this right and everything's sized right, and I just thought it was very sweet of him. So thank you, Christopher.
Thank you, Christopher. Well, and actually, will you do me a favor?
Mhm.
Will you stop sharing?
Yes.
Wonderful.
There we
Awesome.
go.
Now we can see everybody's faces again.
And I want to show some puppets.
Oh, cute. I love
Oh,
the cat.
that's amazing.
That's a
Does
cat for
anyone
you,
have any
Kelly.
other questions or anything for Natasha before we wrap up this evening?
I wanted to show off I got a beautiful, look at
Oh,
this.
yes.
Oh, yay.
Yes, she got her notions pouch, and Kim is wearing her bucket hat. So that leads me directly into the link in the chat, which is if you guys are interested in Knitting for Peace merchandise, we have a full storefront on our website, and it's through Bonfire. So yeah, if you want to get some cool merchandise and support us, that's a really good way to do it. And again, just a reminder that we're trying to first restock our storage room with kids scarves, kids hats, and peace pals for the upcoming season. Because it's a regular occurrence that Joe will ship out 400, 500 at a time, right? To help these schools. So we're trying to restock our storage. Second is it is a fundraiser because it costs money to do our mission, right? Nothing, as we all know, is free. So please share this, even if it's not within your budget this month, which we totally understand. Share on social media with your friends and family. We post all the time. And there's the link to that again. And then the final thing is to create this community. So we really hope to see you on Monday for the craft circle. Thank you again, Natasha. Thank you to everybody who keeps coming back and making all of this happen. I'm just really grateful to be a part of this community and grateful to all of you. So I'm going to say thank you, and then I'm going to stop recording.